This is MacVoices TV. Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is MacVoices TV. You're about to see an interview with Joe Kissell about his new Take Control book on one of our favorite topics. But I need to let you know that I will not be appearing in the video. Unfortunately, we had a little technical problem. Joe's side recorded just fine. Both sides of the audio recorded fine. My picture froze after 3 seconds. So rather than asking you to just look at a still picture of me trying to ask Joe questions, I'll appear as a disembodied voice and Joe will be on camera the whole time. It's something a little bit different, but we decided not to scrap the video and lose all of Joe's wisdom. So here's Joe Kissell. Thanks for watching. Welcome to MacVoices TV. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. I'm happy to have back again Mr. Joe Kissell with a new Take Control book. This time it's Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac. Joe, welcome back to MacVoices TV. It's great to have you.
Well, I'm happy to be back here.
Well, you're not back here. You're in someplace new, as the viewers can tell by the background. You've yes. accomplished your transition, and
so there's no longer a playpen within 3 inches of me. It's extraordinary. So our toddler, he's 16 months old now, or a year and a half for ordinary people. He has like a whole room that he can walk around in and play in and throw toys all around. And I have a room too. That's my office. It has a door that closes and it has it's really great. So I have my own corkboard. I just put this up this morning. I haven't even put anything on it yet, and I have my own bookshelf, and it's really fantastic. So
down, boy, down.
Yeah.
So Joe, did this? Now I know you had a really prime location in Paris. At the old place, how far did you have to move to get your own bookshelf and your own door and all this?
Well, it wasn't really that far, just sort of over the hill. So it was like a little less than 3 kilometers, mile and a half or something. But this was actually, I've moved many times. I totally lost track of how many times this is my 3rd apartment just since moving to Paris in 2007. And I thought that I was like an old pro. Like, if anyone has this moving thing down, I would have said it was me. But this move was super hard. It was harder than my move from San Francisco to Paris. It was harder than my move from, California to Canada, or Canada back to California, years ago. And there were a lot of reasons for that, which I will not bore you all with. But anyway, it was quite extraordinary. This apartment, apart from having more space and better laid out space, is in a great location, a neighborhood that we weren't really familiar with before. It's sort of on the north side of Montmartre. So it's really cool. It's so many neat shops and restaurants. And it's sort of for people of our sort, which is to say, it's not one of those super expensive fancy neighborhoods where we just feel like, can't afford anything in a shop and never dressed right and whatever. And it's also not a real sort of grungy, working class neighborhood. It's just sort of in between. It's sort of in the middle, and it has You know what it has? It has lots of award-winning bakeries. So that's really great. There's a bakery near us that has, if you can believe it, double chocolate baguettes, and they are so good. They are amazing. And it's just like a 10-minute walk up the hill to Sacré-Cœur, which you give it, a great panoramic view of the entire city. So it's a really nice location.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm sure the location was chosen carefully in relation to the bakeries.
Of course.
Of course. Of course. So in the midst of this move, you decided to complete yet another Take Control book. But this is a new book, a not new book. It's an update to some old material, but you've repackaged it. Let's ask you to explain Take Control, and I want to make sure I say it right, Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac, and how it compares with some of the books that at least some of the viewers may already have from you.
Well, I thought, let's try something completely new, a topic that I've never even touched before.
Yeah, we never talk
about
backups.
that next month.
Yeah.
But So a little bit of history. Back in 2004, 5, like eons ago in computer years, I did I think it was like my second Take Control book, my third, which was called Take Control of Mac OS X Backups. So we knew that backups were a big deal. They were a problem, something that a lot of Mac users were having a lot of trouble with. So I wrote this book, and it was 100 and some pages long, and we had this long discussion about what should we call it. And I said, well, you should call it Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac. But in the course of talking about it with Adam and Tanya, we all realized that if we called it Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac, then a lot of people would assume that it also covered Mac OS 9, which was sort of recently departed, and a lot of people were still using it. And we wanted to make sure that it was clear that this was really only going to cover Mac OS X and not Mac OS 9. So we decided to put Mac OS X in the title, which was fine at the time, but it always felt kind of clunky, kind of unnatural. And then if we have this endless long list of books that people are searching through, people would be looking for backing up or backups or backup, and they wouldn't find it because that's, it's sort of hidden. So since Mac OS X has definitively established itself now, we don't really have to apologize for that or explain our way around it. We decided that this would be a good time to return to the original title. But we're not just changing the title, we're in fact conflating two books. So the second part of the story is we had this 100 and some page backup book, and every year or so I would have to revise it. So there would be new backup software, and something else happens. So Time Machine appears, got to expand the book, and new cloud storage services appear, so I got to expand the book, and new hardware and new software and new techniques appear, so expand. So the book grew to well over 200 pages, and because I was trying to always keep it comprehensive, and people started to write to us and say, well, I just want to get my Mac backed up. I don't want to read 200 pages of technical stuff, most of which really doesn't apply to me. Is there any way you could give us something a little more, concise? So that produced a book, Take Control of. First, it was easy backups in Leopard. Because we wanted to highlight the fact that Leopard was where Time Machine appeared, and then we later retitled that to Take Control of Easy Mac Backups. Again, once that sort of was no longer the interesting part, and so that was half the size. Was about 100 pages. It focused mainly on Time Machine and bootable duplicates, and was a very simplified approach that didn't have all that extra stuff in it, and that was great for some people. But it produced another problem for us, which was having to maintain two separate books, which was a real drag. So every time, I maintain this list of new stuff that's going on in the backups world, and when the list gets to be a certain length, I say, well, time for new edition. So it actually became a new edition of two books, and it was hard and time-consuming to do the writing and the producing and the selling, and it just got complicated with all the different combinations of upgrade offers and all this kind of stuff. So we decided that we were going to simplify everyone's life, sort of throw out the whole thing and start from scratch. Well, not really start from scratch, but sort of rethink what I basically did was it's as though I cut up the book, both books, the easy backups and the big backups, into thousands of little pieces of paper and stuck them on a wall and rearranged them into a completely new order and threw out about a third, more than a third of the stuff. And now we have a new book. So it draws a lot on both of the earlier books, but instead of being 300 pages long, it's actually shorter than the big backups book was, and it's reorganized so that basically we put all the easy stuff first. So if you are the sort of person that just wants me to tell you what to do and you're going to sit down and do it, and you don't want to know about all of your options and you don't want to read theory and all that kind of stuff, fine. Just sit down and read like the first half of the book, and you're good. If you do want more, then no problem, you keep reading. So we have combined the two books. We have reorganized the information so that it's much smarter, I think, much better organized. And I threw away a lot of stuff that really, at this point, I realized it just isn't needed anymore. I mean, I had previously spent something like 7 pages trying to convince readers that optical discs, CDs and DVDs, aren't really the best medium for backups. And I looked at this and I thought, Macs are shipping without optical drives anymore. Do I really need to spend 7 pages convincing you that this isn't a good long-term strategy? So I just, either massively condensed or completely removed a whole lot of stuff that just nobody cares about anymore. Not nobody, but you know what I mean. I really, really toned down the stuff that seemed to me to be superfluous in, 2011 in this day and age. And we also expanded it to include all the new stuff in Lion, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and new things going on in the cloud, new techniques that are popping up. So it's very fresh, it's up to date, it's current, it is easier to read and more helpful and less cluttery than before. So I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you take that approach. I like the idea of having it all in one book because that means I can go and get I don't want to say the practical advice, it's all practical, but I can get the sort of how-to up front. And if I'm curious or if I find that I want to tweak something or whatever, I don't have to go and buy a separate book. I just turn to the back part of the book and get my answers. Right. So it sounds good. It sounds like a very logical way to do it. And
I hope so.
I love your point about the CDs and DVDs. This just came up at our user group meeting last month. There's still a lot of people out there using those mediums, and there's nothing wrong with them to a point. But Joe, the conclusion that was kind of reached by all of us is that there's no perfect backup medium, that you almost have to be engaging in multiples. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, well, I agree. There is no perfect medium. I mean, I like hard drives. Hard drives have a lot of virtues. They're faster than DVDs, and they hold more, and so forth. The problem with there are a number of problems with optical media, and I'm not going to bore all of you with them, just as I'm not going to spend 7 pages talking about them in the book. But I mean, the thing I just want to focus on is longevity. So there's a certain sense in which you have to worry about, is the data on this disk going to degrade over time? Will it still be readable in 5 years or 10 years? And that is a problem, and it is something that you do have to worry about. And then there's a secondary problem, which is, will the computer that I have 5 years from now or 10 years from now be able to, will it have a slot where I can put this thing in it? And the answer is probably no. You probably won't be able to actually access that physical medium 5 years from now. So, there are other reasons to disprefer optical disks, and there are other reasons to favor optical or favor hard drives. But what I noticed, because I had this list from way back when, like backup media you should really avoid. And at one time I had to tell this whole story about how, yes, there is a program that will let you back up your Mac to a digital camcorder and, store down a digital camcorder tape that exists. But I had this whole long list of reasons why that's, probably not the best solution for most people. That's gone, by the way. I don't
Glad to hear it.
Yeah. But it's one of those things like I want to be comprehensive and people are asking about it, so I ought to mention it. What I'm noticing, though, is that some of the things that were on this list are actually gradually bubbling up to, well, actually, you might possibly kind of consider that. So things that were on the list of you shouldn't consider were things like SSDs and flash drives and other, RAM-based kinds of things, because, well, they may be fast and they may be small, but man, they're super expensive. 5 years ago, I was saying, who could conceive of backing up their entire hard disk onto a flash drive? But it's becoming conceivable. You can get a MacBook Air with a startup disk, an SSD that's pretty small, and you can get an SD card or a flash drive that's pretty large and not that expensive. And it actually is conceivable for many people to use flash media of one sort or another for backups. And so that's sort of coming up in my list of moving gradually from the probably shouldn't consider it to maybe. And then, at the same time that's going up, optical media is going down. It's just sort of like, well, not so much. So there have been a bunch of things like that. And obviously, cloud-based backup is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm all in favor. There are still some issues with that as well. There isn't a perfect solution. What I do is I have hard drives here. I have a hard drive in the other room, and I have cloud-based backups, more than one. So there are all kinds of variations on this theme, and I don't pretend that one solution is perfect for everyone. But I do say that there are these basic principles that are good for almost everyone. And so as in my previous books, I have my 3-point sermon. I say there's version backups, there's bootable clones, and there's offsite backups. And you can choose different hardware and software and providers and schedules and different things for each of those. But one way or another, I really believe that for the vast majority of people, that combination is the sweet spot. And of course, if you're one of those people who has to read beyond the middle of the book I talk about things like, well, what if you have a gigantic video library? You're a sound engineer and you have massive multi-track audio recordings, or you do video editing, or you have some other sort of thing that you do that produces lots and lots and lots of data, a terabyte a day. What do you do with that? Or what if you spend almost all your time on the road and you can't always count on having a high-speed internet connection? You can't always count on having a large hard drive with you. What do you do then? And so I have a lot of these sort of special cases, like what if? And for all those, again, I can't say here is the perfect ideal solution for everyone, but I do have some ideas and some things that will work for a lot of people in a lot of situations.
We say this every time, Joe, but it keeps changing, but it keeps staying the same. There is no perfect solution for based on the media, but also based on just what you do. I mean, if you sit down and do email and web surfing with your Mac, obviously backups are not quite as big a deal. They're still very important, as opposed to, like you said, audio, video, lots of digital photos, those kind of things, depending on how much you want to protect them. One thing, though, that disturbs me a lot is that I see people hesitate when it comes to the cost of backups, whether that means buying another drive, buying a service like CrashPlan that you and I both love that is a cloud-based service, those kind of things. They sometimes have a hard time justifying that when there's this shiny new MacBook Pro that they're trying to save up for. And boy, you try to make it, we lecture, we talk, we beg, we almost plead with these people, please spend the money, because they show up on our doorstep saying, how do I get it back? And they don't.
Yeah, well, I don't want to in any way seem unsympathetic to people who are feeling a money crunch. But the argument I make, or one of the arguments I make, is how much are your memories worth? How much is your time worth? You lose some valuable files, and there aren't any more pictures of your kid's first birthday. They don't exist anymore. There aren't any pictures of, a relative who has since died. They're gone forever. Or, that novel that you spent 6 months writing is gone forever. I mean, there are some things that it's a pain, but you could recreate them if you sat down and put enough effort into it. And there are some things that you just cannot recreate no matter what you do. And for me, those things are well worth the cost. But this is another one of the aspects of what I was re-examining from, what were my assumptions when I wrote the first book, and what are my assumptions now? So one of my assumptions when I wrote the first book was that most people would rather use just one piece of software for all their backup activities, for bootable duplicates and for version backups. And another was that given the set of tasks that I thought people should do and the state of the art in backup software back then, retrospect was, I thought, kind of the best solution for a large majority of people. And so I had to spend some time convincing readers that, yeah, it's $129 or whatever it is, but really, it's so worth that money. Well, now there are so many backup programs that are free. I mean, Time Machine comes with your Mac. Carbon Copy Cloner is free or really, really inexpensive. So you don't need to think about spending $129 anymore. The price of hard drives has gone way, way, way down. I mean, the price per gigabyte, it's just shocking how much it's fallen since the first edition of this book came out. Cloud-based storage has gotten really, really cheap, especially if you go with Crash Plan. And so given how much more you can back up for how much less money today, I have a hard time getting too worked up about, it's so expensive. It's really not. I mean, you could spend $100, a tiny fraction of what your Mac itself cost, and be really, really safe. And if your time and memories aren't worth that much to you, I mean, okay, but you gotta have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, and the time is a factor that so many times is overlooked. It's why I plead with people to clone a drive. It's not just from the backup of your data, but the backup of your working environment, that you don't even know how long it took you to tweak that, to get all the serial numbers entered, to get the dock icons arranged the way you want them, to put things in your sidebar and your Finder menu bar, to put things in the menu bar up top, just on and on and on. That can take a lot of hours, sometimes days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've gone through that many times, so I really know.
Yeah, and if you don't believe me, folks, try doing a genuine clean install on your Mac and then say, oh, well, I have to reinstall these 53 pieces of software. Now, admittedly, the App Store has gotten better about some of that, but there's still a lot to do.
Absolutely.
Joe, though, you bring up another point that I've sort of forgotten about, and that is the idea of trying to narrow down your selection of software so that you're only using one piece or two pieces of software. With all due respect to the folks who wrote Retrospect, it was a bear to learn.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and now Carbon Copy Cloner, Super Duper, they're pretty much one-trick ponies if you want them to be. There's plenty of sophistication there, but you can do this so easy. But do you have a pet or a favorite that does all the things that we like to do, you and I as experienced and religious and fanatical backuppers?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I have favorites, but I don't have a single tool that does everything I want it to do. Now, there is a class of backup software. Retrospect is in that class. ProSoft's Data Backup, Triadra's TriBackup. There are a bunch of others that are full-featured backup programs. They can literally do any different kind of backup task you might need them to do, and those are fine. I have no complaint with them. I've used them all. Some of them are very good, but most of them are sort of old school. I mean, Retrospect is a shining example of this, but these programs were developed back in the days when backup hardware had a lot lower capacity, was a lot slower. Networks weren't as fast, CPU power was a lot lower, and the only way you could really manage a backup was to set it to happen in the middle of the night sometime when you're not at your computer, because otherwise it would just bog down everything you're doing and everything everybody else on your network is doing. And although you can still certainly get backup software that's like that, it doesn't have to be like that anymore. Software has gotten a lot smarter about figuring out what has changed and doing its thing quietly in the background, staying out of your way. A lot of times I don't have any clue whatsoever that my backup software is even running, and hey, look, all my files are backed up. So basically, I've stopped caring about this idea of having an all-in-one program, because there's no longer this assumption that there's going to be such a huge learning curve, and I got to figure out the scheduling, and I got to figure out the media swapping and all these things. And before I was thinking, well, yeah, it's complicated. You got to figure out all this stuff. So how about if we just make it so you only have to figure that out once, and you just use one tool for everything? But now I'm like, carbon copy cloner, super duper, they're really, really easy. Where am I backing up from? Where am I backing up to? Go. I mean, that's kind of it.
Yep.
And if you use Time Machine, you don't have to use Time Machine, but if you want to use Time Machine, there's an on-off switch. The choices are, where do I put this stuff, and on or off. And that's all. Yes, you can tweak and fiddle more if you want to, but you don't have to. And so confronted with those sorts of really easy to use systems, I just feel like, the all-in-one thing is just not worth worrying about anymore. It really isn't. Now, I have at one time or another run more than 100 different backup programs on my Macs. Right now, I use Time Machine for certain things, and I use Carbon Copy Cloner for certain things, and I use Crash Plan for certain things. So I really like Crash Plan for offsite backups. I also do local backups to Drobo with Crash Plan. And it has a lot of great features that I really, really like, and it's very gentle on my system. It sounds like a laxative or something. Sorry, but
okay, that's the first time we've ever done that on MacVoices.
But no, it doesn't bog down my CPUs and my hard drive. I don't even notice that it's running most of the time. Now, I have to say, I like Crash Plan a lot. I bought the 3-year family unlimited, subscription. I use it on all my machines. It's great. I don't really like the user interface. I have to be perfectly honest. I think it could really use a designer's touch. It looks like it was designed by engineers. It has a lot of options and a lot of fiddly stuff. Okay, nowhere near the old retrospect, sure. You can just sort of, turn it on and click a few things and get serviceable backups. But I'm really not a fan of the UI, especially when you compare it to something like Time Machine, which is just like, oh, I get it. I click and I go back and there's my files. Look at that. It's much more elegant and much more beautiful. Now I use Time Machine, but I don't use it exclusively because there are some things that it can't do, like offsite backups. And I like the fact that Crash Plan is just continuously running all the time. I don't have to wait for an hourly run for my files to be backed up. But neither Time Machine nor Crash Plan will give me bootable duplicates. And there are many great tools for creating bootable duplicates. And the reason I use Carbon Copy Cloner is that it is one of only 4 programs that can create a duplicate on a hard drive that's connected to another Mac on your network. Now, Retrospect can also do that. And a great program called Sync can do that too, SYNK. And for some reason, ChronoSync. Sorry, yes. So ChronoSync, Sync, Carbon Copy Cloner, and Retrospect are the 4 Mac programs that can pull off this trick. Now, I actually use Sync all the time. I love it. And I use ChronoSync all the time. I love it. I I feel bad that I'm sort of promiscuous when it comes to backup software, but I've gotten into habits of I use ChronoSync for certain things, and I use Sync for certain things, and I use Carbon Copy Cloner for certain things. And there's no reason that I couldn't just pick one and get it to do all that stuff. But because of inertia and because I have a system that I set up to do certain things and it works well for me, I just sort of leave well enough alone. But I think that if I were starting from scratch again, that I would probably use Sync to do both my synchronization and my network bootable duplicates. It's a really, really cool program. But for right now, I use it for other things.
Joe, as always, we can keep on going, but I want to make sure we can go for a long time on this topic, both of us. But I want to make sure we get to some of the changes in Lion that affect your backup strategies and all. Perhaps at least in my mind, the biggest one is versions now,
right?
Because you just mentioned about having to wait for an hourly backup to run. You still have an issue here if you should have a hard drive crash, but you don't have quite the same issue with saving over or losing previous versions, because now, if you have the right apps, it's built into the OS.
Right. So Lion has these two features that sort of work in concert. There's autosave and versions. And basically the idea is whenever you save in a versions-enabled app in Lion, it saves that version of the file, but it doesn't completely obliterate the previous version. You can go back to that one too in a sort of time machine-like way. And autosave can automatically save, when you quit or close a file or at certain intervals. So you can, as long as you're using apps that are enabled to use these features, forget about saving. You literally don't even have, you can just forget that command desk that a lot of us have programmed into our muscle memory. You just don't even have to think about it anymore. The saving will happen automatically, and the versioning will happen automatically. And as you say, a lot more rapidly than just when Time Machine does its hourly run. So autosave and versions are great, and I talk about them a lot in the book. One issue is that it's only great if you happen to be using an app that implements them. And obviously, Apple's apps like Pages and Keynote and Numbers do, and Text Edit, and there have been an increasing number of third-party apps that have added this capability, but there's no guarantee that every app you use will use this. I mean, Microsoft Office doesn't. It has its own sort of autosave thing, but it's different. And so if you decide, hey, I'm done saving, it's just all going to be there, it's going to be great, I'll always have all these versions of my files, and don't think through, okay, now this app that I use supports autosave and versions and this one doesn't, and how do I figure out whether it does or doesn't? Then you could get into trouble. Someday, most apps will probably support these features, and you really won't have to think about it anymore, but that day hasn't come yet. So that's a note of caution. The other thing, as you say, is that these versions are stored on your hard drive. So if you have a hard drive crash or some other disk error, you could lose them. But it's not just that. If you try to open a file that's on a server on another Mac, a shared file of some sort, that won't work. And you won't have any. Well, depending on the circumstances, you might not even be informed that the versions aren't being saved the way you expect them to. There was an article about this in Tidbits, and there's stuff on it in the book, and it's complicated. But anyway, it would be nice if you could count on it to work everywhere. It doesn't work everywhere, at least not yet. Maybe it will in the future. But still, it's a nice thing because every time an application saves your work automatically, and every time it saves a new version for you, that gives you an extra little layer of protection. Another chance to go back and undo something that went wrong, whether it was your fault or the computer's fault or your cat's fault or whatever. And a really nice thing about versions is that even if you're working on a gigantic file, you make a change, it's not going to save the whole gigantic file again because that would take up tons of disk space. It just saves what's different about it. So that's a really neat thing. So yeah, autosave and versions a really nice addition to Lion. I'm glad they're there. I look forward to them becoming even better. I wish that versions would sort of stick out a little bit more. You know, I was trying to test this out early on, and I had a document open, and I knew that it supported autosave in versions, and I knew that I had saved it a bunch of times. I'm like, okay, now how do I get at those old versions? And I looked at all the menus, and I clicked, and I right-clicked, and I looked for buttons, and I went to the help, and you know, finally I discovered that you have to hover over the title of the document to get this tiny little arrow that shows up, and you click on that, and then that shows you your version, the little, you know, menu with the versions. I think Apple could have done a better job of making that more discoverable, more apparent. But it's there. And once you know how to use it, it's very, very useful. There's another thing that's kind of cool in Lion, which is especially, I mean, it's mainly for laptop users, but that's, you know, a lot of us, which is that if you use Time Machine, but you don't happen to be hooked up to the drive or on the same network as your time capsule or wherever it is that your Time Machine backups are stored, Time Machine will go ahead and keep running every hour, and it will store its backups on your hard drive or on your SSD on your laptop itself. And then once you do connect to your physical drive or your network or whatever where Time Machine normally stores its stuff, it'll go ahead and copy that stuff over. But the cool thing about this is that you can still save multiple versions of all your stuff and actually get, you know, recover multiple versions of all your stuff, not just the version enabled apps when you're on the go, and even if you're on the go for an extended period of time. That's another thing that it's like, well, that's great. There are a lot of little gotchas and what ifs and yeah, but did you know, and that sort of thing. And I talk about those in the book, but it's a great, you know, anytime I see Apple doing stuff that helps to protect your data and helps to idiot-proof your Mac and protect you not only against yourself, but against, you know, bugs, against malware, against any of those random things that can just happen, I'm really pleased. So I'm very happy about these sorts of things.
Yeah, the one feature that I think is missing right now with versions is my ability to go back, and I realize this is almost like a save as, but it would be nice for me to go back through them and be able to tag one, because I've gone back a couple times and I find myself, okay, now let's see, which one was it? I think it was this one. I'd almost like to be able to put a red check mark beside that one, and let me go back a couple more and then come back to it. It's a very smooth, slick interface, but right now it's lacking a reference point for some of those versions, and sometimes
that would be cool.
Yeah, time just doesn't always do it. You know, it's at noon, at 1 o'clock, at 2 o'clock. That helps, but it's still not perfect.
You know, I'm just thinking. You know, sometimes I remember. Like, well, I know that I was drinking a cup of coffee when I was working on this change in the file. It would be cool as if it associated, like, you know, picture of you. Yeah, that was the day I was wearing the blue shirt, and I was drinking out of the purple mug, and so that's when that change occurred. Sorry.
Interesting interface idea. No, you know, we're laughing about it, but there are things like that out there for your iPhone and your iPad to go and take notes in lectures, record the audio, and match it up with where you're writing things. So,
yeah, like Paranote. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was the one.
You've reminded me, though, of something else that's not really related to Lion, but I wanted to make sure that we mentioned it because it does have a couple of effects on backups, and that is the imminent release of iCloud and the demise of MobileMe. So iDisk has been on my might not want to consider very strongly list for a while, and now it is do not use your iDisk. Apple's backup utility, which came with MobileMe, was on my not so crazy about it list for a long time. Now it's do not use this. Of course, for those people who use MobileMe, that use iDisk for backups, that's going to go away entirely next June. And although it will still be there until then, even if you switch to Mobile Me, the writing is obviously on the wall. And so I'm sorry to see iDisk go in certain ways, but it was clear for quite some time that it wasn't going in a truly useful direction. It wasn't becoming Dropbox. It wasn't becoming, any of these really slick syncing and sharing and backup services, SugarSync and SpiderOak and all those. So I wish that Apple had fixed it, had made it great, or had bought out one of their competitors and integrated that. They didn't. But if you have been relying on iDisk as a destination for your backups, this is the time to start thinking about a different place. And if you have been using Apple's backup program to do your backups, I mean, the program won't suddenly stop working next June, but it's never going to get any better, and it was never that great to begin with. So this is a really excellent time to start looking for an alternative there as well.
Joe, we've talked about a number of things that are in the book, some backup philosophical things here too. To wrap up, anything in the book that you want to tell folks that is there that we didn't get a chance to talk to, that they're going to go and really want to look at, new material in the book or specific things? Because like you said, this is constantly changing. And once again, right now, we're looking at some very big transitions.
Well, it's such a dynamic topic. I did most of the writing on this book a couple of months ago, and then since then it's been in editing and production and various other things. And I took sort of one last pass through it the other day, and I realized, oh man, I can't believe how many things have changed in the last 2 months. Things like new Thunderbolt stuff. Thunderbolt has come out, and so that's a new thing to consider. New ways of connecting USB 3 devices to your Mac, and new Drobo models, and new options in cloud storage, new facts that I have discovered about various cloud storage. So I've updated it as best I can. It's going to be out of date again next week because that's just the way these things work, but we'll keep at it. There aren't, other than covering Lion and covering these new technologies, there aren't any major, huge new sections or anything. But the whole thing is fresher and easier to digest, and I think it's better positioned for the future. I think it'll be easier for this to grow and evolve in the future, and it's shorter and sweeter, I think. So it's in my opinion, it's a very worthwhile upgrade.
This is always such a favorite topic of both of ours, and I think anytime more than two Mac users to get together, you got to think about it. You have to find out about your options. Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac is $15 at TakeControlBooks.com. Folks, it's probably going to be the best $15 you're going to invest, because Joe is going to give you a lot of options. He's going to teach you how to think about backups, recognize the strengths and weaknesses of the various backup options, help you develop your very own backup strategy. And believe me, if you don't have one, you are going to be sorry. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Joe, we say that all the time, but it really is true.
Really is true.
Yeah. So, oh, never mind. I know you've got more books in the works. I'm not even going to ask. Well, but you'll be back here in, let's see. I'll see you after lunch.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes, I have I have a couple of Take Control books that I am vigorously working on right now, and anyone who keeps an eye on the news in the Mac world could probably make some pretty good guesses at what at least one of those is. And I have things lined up for certainly the rest of the year and beyond. So no shortage of stuff to write about.
No question. Well, I will look forward to talking again as we always do, right back here on MacVoices TV. Folks, that's Joe Kissell. Again, he is the author, and I keep looking because we've done so many Take Control titles. I want to make sure I got it right. Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac at TakeControlBooks.com. Joe, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
Folks, I'll have links in the show notes to everything Joe and I talked about, all the programs we've mentioned, the book. Just please go out, stop watching now, go and back up your Mac. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching.
MacVoices TV is part of the MacVoices Group and a member of Mac Level 10.